My name is Sylvia Whitman. I am 66 years old, a retired elementary school teacher, and a widow of 6 months. For more than 4 decades, I stood quietly in the background of my husband Richard's career, raising our only daughter, keeping the house in order, and making sure life ran smoothly. People saw me as steady, dependable, perhaps invisible. But that morning, as I was heading to the meeting about my husband's inheritance, I learned that invisibility can be dangerous because it makes you the perfect target. I remember every detail as if etched into stone. I was stepping out of my front door in the lavender dress Richard bought me for my 60th birthday. The fabric brushed against my knees as the autumn wind carried a faint chill. I had clasped around my neck the crystal pendant he gave me on our last anniversary, the one he said matched the light in my eyes. It felt like armor that morning, though I didn't yet know why. I walked toward my car, keys trembling in my hand. My heart was already racing, not from exertion, but from something else, a restless anxiety I couldn't shake. The streets were quiet, leaves skittering across the pavement. Then from the shadows of the parking lot he appeared. A man in worn boots and a tattered jacket stepped forward, his face weathered, his eyes desperate but clear. He raised his hand slightly as if afraid to scare me. His voice broke as he called out, "Ma'am, please don't start that car." I need to warn you, I froze. My breath caught midair. He came closer but stopped a respectful distance away. His hands shook as he spoke again. I was heading to the meeting about my husband's inheritance. A homeless man warned, "Your son-in-law..." My blood froze, but when I arrived at the table, he lost color and nearly collapsed. That was the moment everything inside me cracked open. "My son-in-law?" I whispered, clutching my car door for balance. My mind shot straight to Luke, Natalie's husband, polished, charming, always quick with a smile. Luke, who called me Mom with practiced warmth, the man I had trusted to look after my daughter. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine. Yes, him. You can't trust what's about to happen inside that building. The sound of my pulse roared in my ears. I wanted to dismiss him, to call him delusional, but something deep in me, the same quiet instinct that mothers carry, kept me standing still. In that split second, memories of Richard flooded me, his voice weak but steady in those final days, whispering, "Stay sharp, Sylvia. Not everyone wishes you well, no matter what they say to your face." And here was this ragged man echoing Richard's warning. I gripped my purse tighter, my fingers digging into the leather. The stranger's words struck me harder than I wanted to admit. The name Luke tasted bitter in my mouth. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. Instead, I simply turned, pressed the elevator button, and carried his warning with me like a stone in my chest. When the elevator doors opened onto the 14th floor, I stepped into the firm's conference hall. The polished mahogany table stretched the length of the room, silver pens lined neatly atop thick stacks of papers. At the far end sat 3 attorneys. Beside them, Luke adjusted his cufflinks, calm and confident. My daughter Natalie sat close by, eyes lowered, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. For a heartbeat, our eyes met, mine and Luke's, and in that instant I saw something shift. The color drained from his face. His jaw tightened, his posture faltered. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. He nearly collapsed right there at the table. I lowered myself slowly into the chair opposite him, my heartbeat still hammering from the stranger's warning. I did not yet know the full story, but I knew enough. Something was about to break wide open. I thought to myself, this is not just a meeting about Richard's will. This is the unraveling of the lies that have been whispered around me for years. This is where everything changes. And before I take you deeper into the storm that nearly destroyed me, I want to invite you to walk this journey with me. Stay with me until the very end, because what happened inside that room will not only shock you, it may also remind you of your own hidden strength. Tell me, as you listen, where in the world you are watching from. It gives me comfort to know that my story, though painful, may reach hearts across oceans. And if you feel something stir in you, whether outrage, recognition, or quiet hope, share it so others may know they are not alone. Now, let me take you back to the moment when the mask slipped, and I began to see who Luke truly was. My name is Sylvia Whitman. I am 66, a retired elementary school teacher, and a widow for 6 months. I wake before dawn. The house exhales in little sounds, the refrigerator humming, the floor settling, the maple outside dragging slow shadows across the kitchen tile. I talk to the quiet like it is a friend who stayed after Richard left. Most days begin with coffee. I rinse the small ceramic filter Richard found in Vermont and measure grounds the way he liked them. 2 spoonfuls generous, 1 modest. The kettle clicks off, steam rises. I pour in circles, slow and steady. He used to lean against this counter and read headlines aloud, softening hard news with a private joke. After breakfast, I walk the yard. I keep a garden because a garden asks what grief can bear. Patience, water, sunlight, and time. I deadhead roses, tie up tomatoes that insist on falling, and tuck marigolds around the beans like small sentries. I press lavender between pages of an almanac from my classroom years. When wind moves through the rosemary, it smells like a clean slate, and I choose to believe it. Twice a week I volunteer at the library. I sit with adults who never had a fair chance at reading, and we sound words together the way I used to with children, mouths shaping syllables, brave and a little embarrassed. Sometimes a breakthrough arrives like sunrise. Sometimes it is a single letter, conquered without fear. Either way, purpose returns to my palm, and the long afternoon ahead grows merciful. By noon, I am back in the kitchen. I still cook as if someone will walk through the door hungry. I butter toast, slice an apple, and set another plate across from mine without thinking. Then I put it away. The motion hurts less now, but it still stings, like a healed bone predicting rain. I wash the dish I didn't use and tell myself I am practicing kindness toward the life that remains. Richard trusted me with our money early in the marriage. He loved ideas. I loved ledgers. He could imagine futures. I could make numbers walk in straight lines. He placed every statement in my hands, not because he didn't care, but because he believed I would care enough for both of us. When he grew ill, we reviewed everything again. The pension, the savings, the will. He made me speak our plan aloud until it felt like a railing I could hold. Still, there are hours that stretch. Grief rearranges furniture you thought was bolted down, then asks you to live with the new layout without bumping your knees. I talk to him when I misplace the shears, when the faucet drips, when the late news shows a ball game he would have watched. I am not losing my mind. I am holding the threads that tie the life we made to the life I have. Our daughter, Natalie, lives 20 minutes away. She is competent, beautiful, quick to organize a meal train for a neighbor, and slower to sit still with her own ache. She married Luke 3 years after college. He is polished, good suit, steady eye contact, the kind of handshake that feels like a plan. On holidays, he times jokes to land between bites, and everyone laughs. If strangers watched us, they would say we are close. But distance can set a table inside a house, and no one names it. Natalie calls, of course. She arrives with leftovers or lilies and insists I keep both. We speak of traffic, the fender bender on Maple, and the play at the community theater. When conversation touches soft edges, Richard's hospital days, the future I have now, she looks to Luke, and he answers for her. It is subtle. It is practiced. Luke offers to help with complex things, contractors, insurance renewals, a roof inspection I did not request. He is thoughtful, attentive, and occasionally a shade too certain. I thank him and keep the ledgers anyway. I keep notes and dates. I keep the habit of reading fine print the way some people keep prayer beads. Outwardly, we are agreeable. Inwardly, I sometimes feel like a room he has measured without asking whether I plan to move. At night, after dishes and the local forecast, I sit at the kitchen table and balance the month on a yellow legal pad. I add columns, subtract little losses, and reconcile every line until the math tells me a story I can trust. The house quiets early, but my mind does not. I remember Richard's hand on mine the week before he died. "You will be all right," he said. I repeat it when the clock argues otherwise. There is resilience in routine. It keeps me from dissolving into afternoons without edges. It gives me something to hold that does not disappear when the door stays closed. I plant bulbs that will not bloom for months and believe, almost stubbornly, that I will be here to see them. On the porch, neighbors wave. I wave back. We trade weather like currency and mean it as care. I do not pretend I am not alone. I am. But I am not abandoned. The life I built with Richard stands up straight around me. The woman I became because of that life does too. When the phone rings from the law office to set the meeting about his estate, I take a breath, mark the calendar, and put the kettle on again. I will show up as he asked me to, steady, prepared, unafraid of paper. And if anyone mistakes my quiet for weakness, they have not read the pages I keep. I am ready to be seen. The phone rang just after 9, a small, polite sound in my quiet kitchen. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Whitman?" a woman asked, crisp and practiced. "This is Wilcox and Harris. We're ready to proceed with Mr. Whitman's estate. Could you come in at 2 o'clock today for the will reading?" 2 o'clock. I repeated the hour silently, as if testing a step before placing my weight on it. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. "I'll be there." "Please bring identification," she added. "Conference room B." Keys clicked faintly behind her. "We're sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I said, and the line went still. I set the phone down and listened to the house breathe. For a moment, I didn't know where to put my hands. I placed them flat on the counter and felt the cool laminate, something certain under air that suddenly felt uncertain. Richard spoke about this meeting long before the last hospital night. He liked to say we were boring in all the right ways. "Everything will go to you, Syl," he told me at this same table with papers fanned like cards. "Our daughter and her husband will have their share after you're gone. You won't need anyone to sign off on your life." He smiled, not triumphant, just relieved, as if he had pushed a heavy door and light came through. I believed him because he was careful, and because I was too. I made another pot of coffee, though the first was still warm. I watched the kettle steam and tried to slow my breath to match it. 2 o'clock. In 5 hours, I would walk into a room of strangers and ask them to confirm what my husband promised. It should have felt simple. It didn't. A pebble of unease tapped my ribs, rolled away, came back again. Upstairs, the purple dress waited like a remembered melody. The fabric had enough weight to hang with dignity. I zipped it and smoothed the seams, then opened the jewelry box where the crystal pendant lay like a drop of winter sun. Richard's fingers fastened it the night he gave it to me. Mine did it now, clumsier, but capable. In the mirror, I saw a woman older than the one who wore this dress at 60, silver threading through auburn, skin mapped by honest weather. Age is the ledger that remembers all the days you paid attention. I lifted my chin, found the line between fragility and steadiness running straight through the middle of my face. I pressed lipstick, not bright, just awake, and stepped back. I looked like someone who could be trusted with a plan. On the bed, I laid the folder I've kept since Richard's diagnosis. Account copies, his last letter to the firm, the list of passwords he made me memorize until I could recite them half asleep. I slid the folder into my tote. Habit is a railing. I would hold it to the car. Outside, the sky had settled into a quiet gray, the kind that makes color honest. Maple leaves were dull gold against it, not shouting, only telling what they knew. A breeze lifted the edge of my scarf. Rain scented the air. I locked the door and checked it twice. Some call that worry. I call it respect for doors. Traffic gathered like geese on the main road. Advance, brake, breathe. Advance, brake, breathe. The radio offered weather, then a story about a boy who built a tiny library. I turned it down and let my thoughts speak. I rehearsed names, attorneys, receptionists, because names are small bridges, and I would need every bridge today. At an intersection, a delivery truck blocked the turn lane, horns knitting into a single complaint. I looked at the clock. Too early to be late, too late to be early. The pebble returned. Not pain, more a pencil pressing a reminder into the margin. Pay attention. I rolled my shoulders and told myself what I tell anxious readers at the library. One line at a time, then the next. Closer to downtown, glass towers threw back the pale sky. Crosswalks filled and emptied like lungs. I parked beneath the building because the letter told me to, and because going underground before a reckoning felt right, like a breath held before speech. The engine softened to silence. I sat a moment with my hands on the wheel, palms warm, fingers steady. 2 o'clock, I thought. We will read what is already true. Then, without knowing why, I added, and if anyone forgot the truth, I will remember it for them. I took the tote, locked the car, and followed painted arrows toward the elevator. A fluorescent light hummed a fraction off pitch. The concrete smelled faintly of rubber and rain. My heels made a modest sound, everything restrained, as if the day had agreed to use its indoor voice. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, doors gliding open like a promise kept. I stepped inside, pressed 14, and watched the numbers climb, each floor a bead on a string I would not let slip. I breathed once, twice, and let the doors carry me toward afternoon light. The parking garage smelled of damp concrete and engine fumes. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, making the air feel colder than it already was. I clutched my tote a little closer as I stepped toward my car, my heels echoing against the cement. The sound reminded me of a clock, each tap pulling me closer to 2 o'clock, closer to the reading of Richard's will. I unlocked the door and placed my folder on the passenger seat. Just as I slid into the driver's seat and reached for the ignition, a shadow moved from behind a pillar. My breath caught. A man stepped forward quickly, his voice raw, urgent. "Mrs. Whitman, please, don't start that car. I need to speak to you." "It's about Luke." I froze, my hand hovering over the keys. The name landed heavy, like a stone thrown into a still pond. Luke, my son-in-law, Natalie's husband, the man who never forgot birthdays, who smiled too easily, who sometimes looked at me as though I were a puzzle missing pieces. I straightened slowly, keeping my eyes on the stranger. His clothes were frayed, a jacket with seams thinning at the elbows, jeans faded unevenly, boots scuffed beyond repair. His beard was patchy, his hair tangled, but his eyes were steady, pleading without menace. I opened my door halfway, the cold air spilling in. "Who are you?" My voice was sharper than I intended. "My name is Martin," he said, keeping his distance. "I used to work upstairs in IT at Wilcox and Harris. Please don't be afraid. I know how this looks." His hands trembled slightly as he raised them in a gesture of peace. I glanced at the elevator, empty, at the wide expanse of concrete where no one else moved. The garage was a cavern swallowing sound. "Why are you stopping me?" He swallowed hard. "Because they don't expect you to be here." "Luke doesn't expect you to show up. He told them you'd forget the appointment." I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles whitening. "Forget?" Martin nodded. "He's been preparing documents, false medical records. He hired a man pretending to be a psychiatrist. They've built a case to declare you mentally incompetent. If they succeed, Luke gains control of everything, every account, every asset." The words sliced through the air. For a moment, I thought the ground had tilted beneath me. "That's absurd," I said, though my throat was dry. I know." He reached into his worn messenger bag and pulled out a small flash drive and a folded packet. He held them out carefully, as if they were fragile. I copied files before they let me go. Emails, recordings, scans. This, he tapped the packet, is proof that the psychiatrist's license was revoked in 2007. He hasn't practiced legally in 15 years, but Luke presented him as legitimate. I stared at the objects in his hand, at the desperation in his face. The sensible part of me wanted to dismiss him, to drive away and call security. But something inside me, deep and wordless, whispered that I was standing at the edge of something true. Richard's voice came back to me. His last weeks, his hand curled around mine in the hospital bed. Syl, don't trust too easily, but don't ignore your instinct either. It's sharper than you think. I reached out, hesitated, then took the USB and the papers. The plastic felt cold, the paper soft from too much folding. My pulse hammered in my temples. "Why are you helping me?" I asked quietly. Martin looked down, then back up. Because Richard was kind to me. He spoke to me in the halls, asked about my daughter when no one else did. I couldn't watch them twist his last wishes into something rotten, and because my own mother was tricked out of her home once. I know what it does to a person. The garage hummed with silence. I studied his face for signs of deceit, but all I found was fatigue and urgency. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had already lost too much. "I don't know what I can promise you," I said. "You don't have to promise me anything," he replied. "Just don't sign anything today without reading it carefully. They'll try to rush you. Don't let them." A car engine revved somewhere in the distance, the sound echoing between pillars. Martin stepped back, retreating toward the shadows. "Be careful, Mrs. Whitman. Please." I sat motionless for several seconds, clutching the packet against my lap, staring at the flash drive glinting faintly in my palm. The air felt heavier now, every breath deliberate. I wanted to believe this was nonsense, the delusion of a desperate man, yet my gut, the same instinct that told me when a student was lying, that told me when Richard needed help before he asked, kept whispering, "Listen, believe." Slowly, I placed the USB into my tote and tucked the papers into the folder Richard had left me. My hand still trembled, but not only from fear. There was something else there. Resolve, thin but growing. I closed the car door and stood beside it, the echo of Richard's words steadying me. "Don't be too trusting, but don't dismiss what your heart already knows." With that, I pressed the elevator button. The doors slid open, bright light spilling across the dim cement. I stepped inside, clutching my tote tighter, and let the doors seal behind me. Upward toward the meeting that was no longer just about paper and ink. It was about truth, and whether I was ready to carry it. The elevator chimed softly, and the doors opened to a hush that felt almost rehearsed. I stepped out, the air cooler on the 14th floor, perfumed faintly with lemon polish and something more sterile. Law and order made tangible. The hallway stretched long and bright, lined with framed degrees and oil paintings of men in suits who looked as though they had never once doubted their authority. My heels clicked against the marble tile, the sound sharp, echoing like a metronome, marking the moments I could not reclaim. I carried my tote against my side, its weight both burden and shield. The folder Richard had trusted me with pressed against my ribs. I inhaled deeply, forcing calm, but the rhythm of my breath betrayed me. With each step, I felt my pulse drum harder, as if my own heart wanted to announce my arrival before I reached the door. At the end of the corridor, the glass panel read, "Conference Room B." Behind the frosted glass, I could make out silhouettes. 4, maybe 5. Their shapes shifted in muted conversation. I steadied my hand on the brass handle, its chill grounding me for a moment before I pushed the door open. The room was wide, the table long and gleaming under pendant lights. Mahogany walls carried bookshelves filled with thick volumes whose spines had not been touched in years. At one end, 3 attorneys sat already arranged, one older with silver hair and a severe tie, one younger, eyes darting nervously, and another with a bland smile that did not reach his eyes. Across from them sat Natalie and Luke. Natalie looked up first. Her face softened with what could almost pass for warmth. "Mother," she said, rising slightly in her seat, "we thought maybe you'd forgotten." She smiled as though it were a small kindness, not an accusation. I looked at her, but did not answer. The words would not come. Or perhaps I chose not to give them. My silence hung between us, deliberate. Luke adjusted his cufflinks with a small flourish, his lips tight, as though he were preparing to play a role he had rehearsed. I crossed the room, every step loud against the polished floor, and placed myself at the head of the table opposite them. The chair was heavier than I expected, but I drew it back, sat, and folded my hands atop the folder in front of me. My heart thundered in my chest, yet my face I kept composed. The lead attorney cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitman," he began, his voice practiced, almost soothing. "Thank you for coming today. We are here to address certain amendments made by your late husband during his final months. These reflect his concern for your well-being." I watched his lips shape the words, each one sharpened to appear gentle. My breath held still, my chest tightening. He slid a neat stack of papers toward me. "Mr. Whitman, in his wisdom, wished to ensure you would be properly cared for. There were signs, you see, of confusion, lapses of memory, understandable at your age. Out of love, he made arrangements." The sound in my ears roared, louder than the soft hum of the overhead lights. I reached forward, my hand steady though I felt the tremor waiting. I flipped the first page. My eyes traced the lines quickly, then froze. It was there, in black and white, statements describing incidents that had never happened, notations of me forgetting addresses, misplacing money, growing agitated in public. Each paragraph painted a version of me I did not recognize, a woman diminished and unstable. At the bottom, Richard's signature scrawled in a hand too uneven to be his. My throat went dry. I turned another page. Medical reports stamped with authority but hollow when read. Diagnoses I had never received. Consultations with a doctor whose name I had never heard. The ink pressed too dark, the letters too precise, as though copied rather than lived. I looked up slowly. Natalie's gaze dropped to her hands folded on the table. Luke, however, met my eyes squarely, his mouth curving into a smile that wanted to appear reassuring. Instead, it felt like victory. The younger attorney spoke now, leaning slightly forward. "As you can see, Mrs. Whitman, these documents establish a trust. Your son-in-law Luke has been appointed trustee to manage the estate on your behalf. It will guarantee your comfort, your safety, without the stress of complex financial matters." My chest constricted. The edges of the papers blurred. Still, I forced my voice to remain calm. "These are lies," I whispered, more to myself than to the room. My fingers brushed the supposed signature again, tracing what should have been Richard's name. It was familiar, yet foreign. A counterfeit of the hand I had watched for 43 years as he wrote letters, checks, notes of love. I closed the folder and set it back on the table, pressing my palms flat against the wood as though grounding myself against the tide. No one spoke. The silence grew thick, every eye waiting for me to break. I sat straighter, though inside the tremor grew. My heart beat so loudly it seemed to shake the air. They expected me to fold, to nod, to let their narrative replace my truth. But Richard's voice came back again, faint but firm. "Syl, don't be afraid of paper. Paper can lie. You cannot." I lifted my eyes once more, looking first at the attorneys, then at Natalie, and finally at Luke. Their faces told me what the pages had already revealed. Something precious was being stolen in plain sight, and yet I knew. I would not let them take it quietly. I let the papers rest beneath my palms, then lifted my head and let my voice land where it needed to. "Who wrote these words?" I asked, each syllable clean. "Who decided I am confused? Who decided I need a guardian?" Luke moved first. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, tone righteous, tender, like a doctor narrating a cure. "I did this to protect you," he said. "Mother, you've been forgetting things. It's dangerous. You left milk in the pantry. You got dates wrong. You called the neighbor by the dog's name. You shouldn't carry finances at your age." He said "mother" as if it were a key. Natalie's eyes fell to her lap, fingers whirring the strap of her purse. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at him. I reached into my tote and set a flash drive on the wood. Beside it, I placed a creased packet. "These are internal emails and recordings," I said evenly. "And this packet verifies the psychiatrist named in your filings lost his license in 2007. Revoked. He has not practiced legally since, yet his signature appears in your documents." The senior attorney's expression faltered. The younger cleared his throat, then stopped, eyes flicking to Luke. The bland smile attorney reached for the packet, but I kept my hand on it a beat longer, making him lift it from under my palm. Boundary reclaimed. Luke laughed once, brittle. "You can't be serious. That," he jabbed a finger at the drive, "could be anything. A story some vagrant spun to get money. You'll believe a drifter over your own family?" My heart beat steady now. Fear had left when truth entered. "I'll believe evidence," I said, "and my memory." I turned to the attorneys. Who gathered these reports? Who scheduled this so-called evaluation? Natalie shifted, whispered, "Luke." Letting the word break, Luke's voice rose, the practiced calm cracking. "I won't apologize for caring about safety. She's alone. She talks to herself. She double locks doors and checks the stove 3 times. This is what responsible sons-in-law do. We prevent accidents before they happen. You prevent independence before it happens," I replied. "You make rituals of caution look like symptoms." The senior attorney tried for control. "Mrs. Whitman, perhaps we should take a brief recess while we—" "No," I said. The word was even. "We proceed." I slid the drive across the table. "You'll find a recorded conversation between Mr. Thompson and your paralegal discussing how to backdate a capacity assessment. You'll also find an instruction to scrub a ledger note showing I paid the insurance premium online at 8:12 p.m. The same night your statement claims I was unable to navigate household accounts." The bland smile attorney's pen stilled. The younger looked a little sick. The older pushed back an inch, as if space might insulate him. Luke flushed. "This is slander." "You have no right to accuse me. Do you hear yourself? You're being manipulated." He turned to the lawyers with a flourish. "She's confused. This is exactly what we were trying to avoid." "You were trying to acquire control," I said. "There's a difference." Natalie's voice arrived like a draft through a cracked window. "Luke, maybe we should—" He cut her off without turning his head. "Don't." Then, louder, "I have done everything for this family. When your father—" He gestured toward me, correcting clumsily. "When Richard got sick, who drove? Who met contractors? Who made sure the roof didn't leak?" "You kept receipts," I said. "I kept the books." Silence. The older attorney opened the packet, scanning the revocation notice. His mouth tightened. "Where did you obtain this?" he asked. "From someone who remembered Richard was a person, not a file," I said. "From a man with nothing to gain except his conscience." Luke shoved back his chair. It scraped. The sound bounced off the paneled walls. "This is ridiculous. That man is a liar. He sleeps under a bridge. He is a nobody. And you—" He pointed at me, voice spiking. You are choosing a nobody over me. I met his anger with calm I didn't have to manufacture. I'm choosing the truth, I said. If you brought me your truth, it wouldn't need costumes. He stared, breathing hard. The mask he wore, the benevolent son-in-law, slid an inch, then another. I saw the arithmetic working behind his eyes. Assets, accounts, signatures, obstacles. The math had lost a zero. I folded my hands. Let's be precise, I said to the attorneys. On page 2 of the amendment, the signature attributed to my husband curls upward at the H. Richard's hand curled down. On page 5, the date format is month, day, year. He wrote day, month, year after his London grant. And the physician's address, it's a UPS store. The younger swallowed. The senior set the packet down as if it might stain. Mrs. Whitman, we were presented with materials we believed were authentic, believed, I echoed. Belief is not proof, it is a choice. Luke slapped his palm flat on the table. Enough! You will sign the trust and stop this performance. I let the demand sit, then set it aside like a dish I didn't order. No, I said again. There will be no trust. Not today. The room held its breath. Somewhere a copier started, a mechanical whir indifferent to theater. I lifted the pendant, its weight steady. I am not confused, I said quietly. I am not unsafe. I am not alone. Luke's mouth twisted. We'll see about that, he muttered. We will, I agreed, but we'll see it with the lights on. The door clicked, then opened on a current of cooler air. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, followed by a woman in a slate blazer and, behind her, Martin, hair combed, the frayed jacket zipped. The room rearranged itself in an instant, lawyers stiff, Natalie upright, Luke frozen mid-breath with his palm still on the table. Good afternoon, the woman said, showing a badge. Detective Avery. We've received materials related to Mr. Whitman's estate. We'll need to ask some questions. Her gaze moved from the attorneys to Luke, stopping at the stack of amendments in front of me. And we'll need to secure those documents. No one spoke. I heard only the hum of the vents and the tiny click as the older attorney's pen met the table. Martin stayed near the door, eyes on me for a quiet second. I gave him a nod. I was not all right. I was anchored. The detective held out a hand. The flash drive? The younger attorney began to protest. Detective, this is a private legal... It's a crime scene if the documents are forged, she said. We'll behave. Professionally. So will you? I slid the drive toward her. Martin stepped forward with an envelope and placed it beside the drive. Email threads between Mr. Thompson and staff, he said. Audio about backdating a capacity evaluation plus a clip where the psychiatrist's revoked license is acknowledged and dismissed. Luke's chair scraped. This is outrageous, he snapped. Those files are stolen. They're evidence, the detective said. If you'd like to contest chain of custody, do it after I read the part where you discuss sealing the old lady's leaks. She opened the envelope. Mr. Thompson, did you or did you not ask this firm to remove ledger entries to support a petition for guardianship? Luke looked at the lawyers, then at Natalie, then at me. A flush crawled up his neck. I asked them to help us keep her safe, he said. She's confused. She talks to herself. I spoke before he could fill the air with that script. Self-talk is not incompetence. It's grief with good manners. The bland smile attorney tried to reclaim the room. Detective, our client provided reports from a licensed psychiatrist. Licensed 15 years ago, Martin said. Revoked since 2007. The older attorney pinched the bridge of his nose. The younger swallowed. The detective slid the reports into a sleeve. Mrs. Whitman, did you ever meet this doctor? No, I said. I met my husband's handwriting for 43 years. That signature isn't his. Natalie's chair creaked. She kept her eyes on her hands. When she finally looked up, her mascara had smudged. Her voice came out small. "Mom, I'm sorry. I thought you didn't need much money. I was wrong." The sentence found its mark. I let it rest and did not rescue her from it. Luke slapped the table. "Don't do this," he hissed at her. "Not now." Then louder to the room, "Everything I did was for this family. My company is drowning. You don't understand responsibility. I covered repairs, insurance, deliveries. I kept the world from collapsing on her. You kept your story from collapsing," I said. "You didn't protect me, Luke. You wanted control." Color drained from his face. He sat back too quickly. The chair caught him with a thud. His hands, always theatrical, now shook. The detective addressed the attorneys. "We're going to collect copies of all drafts, emails, billing records, and any recordings made for today. We also need your retention policy and the names of everyone who touched these files." The senior attorney squared his shoulders. "Detective, our firm has served this city for 40 years. "Then you know how subpoenas work," she said. She turned to me. "Mrs. Whitman, do you feel able to continue, or would you prefer a break?" "I can continue," I answered. Natalie's apology unraveled into tears. "I thought if Luke managed things, you could rest. I kept telling myself you were fine with less because you don't spend much, you don't travel." I told myself it was practical. "Practical for whom?" I asked. "For us," she whispered. Luke tried for one more salvo. "If you shut down this plan, there won't be anything left when she needs care. Do you want that on your conscience?" The detective raised an eyebrow. Was that a threat or a budget forecast? The older attorney cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, please refrain." I felt the pendant at my throat. "Here is what I need," I said to the detective. "An acknowledgement that the original will stand, and that attempts to alter it using fraudulent evaluations are under investigation. I will not sign a trust. I will not surrender capacity I possess. You won't have to," she said. "Not today." Silence spread, then settled. Outside the glass, a copier began its mechanical hymn. In that ordinary sound, my breathing slowed. One officer photographed the table while the other labeled an evidence bag. A recorder's red light blinked. "Standard procedure," the detective said, so every word would stand later. The senior attorney dabbed his brow. Natalie's tissue shredded slowly between trembling fingers there. Natalie wiped her cheeks. "Mom," she said, voice thick, "I can make this right." "You can begin," I said. "Right takes longer." Luke stared at the table, jaw clenched. The weight of consequences arrived like weather. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then, with the smallest exhale, folded inward. The flourish and the certainties left him. What remained was a man who had run out of script. He sagged into the chair, colorless, the performance spent. For the first time all afternoon, he was quiet. The room, at last, belonged to the truth. The station smelled faintly of coffee gone cold, and rain carried in on uniforms. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, steady and unyielding. I followed Detective Avery through the double doors, Martin walking a half step behind me. His jacket looked almost tidy now, zipped up to his chin, but his hands still trembled around the strap of his bag. "Right this way," the detective said, leading us down a corridor lined with bulletin boards and missing person flyers. At the end, glass partitions revealed small rooms where officers took statements, each space filled with a different kind of fatigue, raised voices, bowed heads, shuffling papers. Luke and two of the attorneys were already seated in separate interview rooms. Through the glass, I saw Luke gesturing wildly, his mouth moving faster than his composure could follow. One officer leaned forward, unblinking, while another typed notes. The attorneys' faces were pale, drained of polish. Their pens lay still, as if words had abandoned them. Detective Avery motioned me toward a chair in the waiting area. "We'll need you shortly, Mrs. Whitman. For now, please sit. Mr. Martin will be." Giving his full statement first, Martin nodded, clutching his envelope. He disappeared into a room where another detective waited with a recorder. The door closed, leaving me in the soft din of phones, ringing and keyboards clattering. I folded my hands in my lap and looked around. The waiting area was crowded with quiet stories. To my left, a woman in her 70s rubbed her temple while a younger man paced nearby, arms crossed. I heard fragments, words like power of attorney, checks, misunderstanding. Across from me, another woman, her hair white and neatly pinned, sat alone staring at the tiled floor. Her purse bulged with documents. No one sat beside her. I watched them and felt the ache press deeper into my ribs. It wasn't just me. I wasn't the only one suddenly labeled fragile, incompetent, disposable. A lifetime of keeping houses standing, of raising children, of balancing books without fanfare, dismissed with a forged signature, a whispered doubt, a story repeated often enough that it began to sound like truth. I thought of Richard again, his voice hoarse but certain. "Don't let them write you off, Syl. You know what you're worth." Yet here we were. So many women, each with different faces, but the same hollow carved into our lives by people we once trusted. Through the glass, I saw Martin lean forward in his chair, his voice low but urgent. He laid out his timeline. The day he noticed metadata altered on Richard's documents, the instructions from above to delete ledger notes, the conversation he recorded when Luke asked how to make the old files disappear. He pointed to the flash drive, explaining how he copied evidence before they fired him. His words seemed to steady as he spoke, truth reinforcing his backbone. The detective, listening to him, scribbled steadily, nodding at intervals. Martin's hand still shook, but not with fear. This time it looked like release, like something finally lifting. I pressed my palms together, feeling the ridge of my wedding band against my skin. "Not just me," I repeated inwardly. "Not just me." The thought was bitter, but it also carried a kind of solidarity, unspoken but present. In every weary glance from the women waiting, I saw a mirror. The indignity of being underestimated, the violence of being erased. A clock on the wall ticked too loudly. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sound anchor me. This was not the end. This was a beginning, a slow one dressed in paperwork and procedure, but a beginning nonetheless. The door to Martin's room opened. He emerged, pale but upright, and gave me a small nod. "They have it now," he murmured, almost to himself. "They can't ignore it anymore." I squeezed his arm gently. "You did the right thing." Detective Avery returned. "Mrs. Whitman, we'll call you in shortly. For now, sit tight. We'll need your account after reviewing Mr. Martin's evidence." I nodded, though my throat tightened. I watched Luke through the glass again. His hands no longer flourished. They were flat against the table, knuckles white. The mask he wore so easily at family dinners was slipping, and underneath it was something raw, cornered. The women around me shifted in their seats, waiting their turns in stories parallel to mine. I realized I was not only here to defend Richard's will, I was here with them, for them, and maybe, just maybe, for myself in ways I had never considered. The waiting room buzzed, phones rang, a copier clicked into life. Life went on in ordinary tones while my own had tilted. I sat very still, holding both my grief and my steadiness like two sides of the same coin, and whispered inside, "I am not invisible. Not anymore." 3 days later, the doorbell rang, its chime unusually sharp against the stillness of the house. I set down the cup of tea I had been nursing and walked slowly to the door, already sensing who might be standing there. When I opened it, Natalie stood on the porch alone. Luke was nowhere in sight. She looked diminished, as though some part of her had unraveled since the meeting. Her hair was uncombed, her eyes red-rimmed, and she clutched her coat tightly, though the afternoon air was mild. "Mom," she said, her voice frayed, "I was wrong." I stepped back and let her enter. She crossed the threshold cautiously, as though the house itself might pass judgment. In the living room, she paused, glancing at Richard's empty chair angled toward the garden. It was the same place he always sat when waiting for her visits. She lowered herself onto the sofa, but sat perched at the edge, hands twisted together in her lap. "I was afraid," she whispered, unable to meet my eyes. "That's why I stayed silent." I didn't know how to stop Luke without tearing everything apart. I told myself silence was safer than fighting. Her words scraped against the quiet, words I had wanted and dreaded in equal measure. My memory drifted to a much earlier time. Natalie, at 10 years old, her face flushed with sincerity, slipping me a folded paper written in careful, uneven script. "I want to learn to love the way you love Dad." I had kept that note for years inside a cookbook until the pages were worn. That little girl's vow felt oceans away from the woman now hunched before me. "You were silent every day," I said, my voice carrying more ache than anger. And that silence hurt worse than any accusation. It wasn't words that wounded me most. It was the absence of them. Every time you let Luke speak for me, every time you looked away, I felt myself vanish a little more. Natalie bent forward, tears spilling freely. "I thought if I kept quiet, maybe it wouldn't go so far. Maybe you'd never have to see the worst of it." She shook her head violently. "But I see now that my silence gave him permission. It gave him power." I stood near the window, watching the branches sway outside, and let her words hang. Comfort rose instinctively in my chest. I wanted to cross the room, to touch her shoulder, to remind myself she was still my daughter. But I stayed still. She had to carry this weight herself. "You let him draw me as weak," I said softly. "You let others believe I was incapable, and you never once said, 'That's not my mother.' Do you know what that feels like?" She raised her tear-streaked face. "Like betrayal," she whispered. "Like death," I answered. "A slow death that comes while you are still breathing." Her sobs deepened, the sound raw and unfiltered, echoing off the familiar walls. I did not rush to soothe her. I let her grief take shape in the room, the same way her silence had once filled it. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she said at last, voice breaking. I lowered myself into Richard's chair, the cushion sighing with memory. "You don't deserve silence either," I said after a long pause. "So speak. Tell the truth if you have anything left to offer. But understand, this is the last time I will hold space for excuses." Natalie wiped at her face with the back of her hand, shoulders quaking. "I want to repair what I've broken. I don't know how, but I want to try. I lost myself in his fears, in his debts, in the hunger for more that wasn't mine. I convinced myself you didn't need much, that less would be enough for you. I see now how cruel that was. Peace built on silence is not peace at all. It's another kind of violence." Her confession rang true, cutting through the stagnant air. I let it settle like dust drifting to the floor. I stayed where I was, my hands folded over my lap, my heart aching with every sob that shook her frame. I did not rise, did not draw her into my arms. Some bridges can't be rebuilt in a single moment, no matter how desperate the tears. So I let her cry. The sound filled the house until it became its own kind of truth. I watched her crumble, and I stayed rooted in the chair Richard once called his post of strength. My daughter wept across from me, and for the first time in years I allowed myself not to fix, not to comfort, but simply to witness. 6 months later, the house sounds different. The refrigerator still hums, the floor still settles, but the quiet no longer tastes like absence. It tastes like room, room to breathe, to plant, to begin. On Mondays and Thursdays, I take the bus to the Community Center for Financial Safety. I sit at a round table and we read bank statements together. We trace signatures and name the tricks. I teach the small habits that make a person hard to steal from. Write dates, photograph receipts, confirm callers, freeze credit when fear arrives. Some students come angry, some ashamed. Most leave taller. They call me Mrs. W at the center. I bring oatmeal cookies and a notebook of checklists. Detective Avery visits once a month to explain how cases unfold, what to document, and how to protect an email trail from being accidentally cleaned. Every time she walks in, I feel a click of gratitude, as if a door kept opening. People come in hunched and leave sitting straighter. Sometimes all they borrow from us is language, capacity, consent, undue influence, and that is enough to start. Martin lives now in the small apartment above Richard's workshop. We fix the leaky sink together, both of us laughing when the wrench slipped and water baptized the floor. He tends the vegetables like old friends, staking tomatoes, coaxing basil, greeting the beans each morning with a nod. On weekends, he helps me run the tiny free library by the sidewalk. Children return the same dog-eared mysteries. When donations arrive, he sorts the boxes by age, while I tape notes inside the covers. Take me, then bring me back for someone else. In the evenings, we sit on the steps with mugs of tea and trade weather reports and small victories. No one saves the other. We simply witness. Natalie writes each month in blue ink on unlined paper. One letter says, "I am learning to talk without permission." The next, "I removed Luke from my accounts. I kept my name, another. I am in counseling. I am practicing no." She does not ask for forgiveness. She asks for a chance to practice truth. I write back, brief but real. I tell her what is growing in the garden, what the finches argue about, what I am reading, and one memory of her father at his gentlest. I do not offer easy absolution. I do not close the door. We are rebuilding quietly like carpenters working by hand. Luke appears in the paper under a careful headline. Investigation continues. 2 court dates pass, then a third. His attorney speaks in tidy phrases about misunderstanding and stress. The facts speak louder. The revoked license, the emails, the audio, the invoices that tried to price my autonomy. I do not watch the hearings. I bake a lemon loaf on the mornings he appears, then carry slices to the center and pour coffee. Consequences belong to the institutions now. Mine is the work of living. Sometimes at dusk, I sit on the back steps and talk to Richard. I tell him about the woman who realized the consultant charging her fees is her grandson, and the man who brought a bag of crumpled receipts and left with a ledger. I tell him I wore the pendant he gave me to a graduation at the library, where one of my students read a full page without stopping and then clapped for herself. I tell him I am learning the names of clouds. Grief does not vanish. It green grows, finding trellis and sun. I am 66. I am not young, but I know I have just entered the brightest chapter. The proof is in small, sturdy facts. I sleep without bracing for footsteps that mean harm. My calendar holds squares filled with verbs I chose. I can say no without apology and yes without fear. When a stranger tries to sell me a protective trust, I smile and point him to our Tuesday workshop. This morning, I dig a new hole in the garden near the fence line. The soil is dark and forgiving, the sort that keeps a secret and gives it back as fruit. I set a sapling in the ground, tamp the dirt with my palms, and water slowly until the surface shines. For us, I tell the tree, Richard and me. For the hours he held my hand, for the years I kept the books, for the quiet that taught me what strength sounds like when it stops apologizing. I press a marker into the earth. Whitman maple, new roots. We will keep tending this garden together, gently. Sun lifts like a careful blessing over the neighbor's roof. Light slips across the beds, touches the rosemary and warms the stones. I feel it find my face. The house behind me is the same shape as before, and yet not the same at all, because I am not the same. I was once treated like something used up, tucked away, convenient to ignore. I know better now. I still carry value, and this time, that value belongs to me. Before we say goodbye, I would love to know where you are watching from. Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night when stories keep you company? Tell me in the comments. I read each one with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing, not just to hear more, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending this time with me. Wherever you are, carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle does not knock at the door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart.